Hello, we're looking at Wavesfactory Mercury and Wavesfactory Mercury Lite. On the screen in front of you, you should see Mercury, which is on the left, and Mercury Lite, which is on the right. For all intents and purposes, first view, they look pretty much the same. The big difference is Mercury contains a lot more samples. It's about 36 gigabytes of space it requires, and Mercury Lite only has about 3.6, so that's 10 times more samples, 10 times more data included in the full version of Mercury. And I'm hoping that this will give you a little overview of what the two instruments do side by side, so you can make up your mind whether you want to pay the premium price for the full version or just stick with the Lite version. There are some big differences, but they may not bother you. It may not be a problem for you. Depends what kind of thing you're recording and what purpose you need a virtual piano for. I compose music. That's something I do, and I like to have a choice over the timbre. I like to have a choice over the space in which my instruments sit, and I think this is where Mercury shines, and Mercury Lite basically sits a little bit in the shadows. But it's not all about tweakability, and it's not all about how we can use it in our compositions. It could just be that it sounds nice. So let's have a little listen. I'm going to play a very simple little kind of a sequence, a couple of chords modulating backwards and forwards, a little arpeggio. And I'll start with Mercury, and then after once or twice through, I'll then shift over to Lite version. What I've done is I've loaded up both of these contact instruments from their default preset. I've not done any tweaking. The HQ mode is turned off, and all of the effects are turned off, and everything's set to pretty much default. The gains, if you can see on the screen, are slightly different on the two pianos, but that doesn't seem to make a difference much in the volume. If anything, Mercury Lite seems to be a bit quieter overall, despite the higher gain. But anyway, I'll play the little tune, and then we'll switch between the Lite and the full version. So starting with the full version. Now the Lite version. So I think you can probably hear what the fundamental differences are between these two pianos. The full version of Mercury has a much more direct sound. And again, I haven't done much in the way of mixing. That is how it sounds out of the box. Whereas the Lite version has a much more treated sound, a lot more ambience and room sound in there. And the reason there is strictly because the full version of Mercury contains 5 different microphone positions, whereas Mercury Lite has no mixer at all. So Mercury Lite lacks all the ability to pull in from a large sample library and bring in those different mics. If, for instance, I choose to turn off the ultra close, the close, the mono, and the far, and just play the mid microphone on Mercury, and then bring in a little bit of the close, but not the ultra close. That is sounding a little bit more like what we had from Mercury Lite. So I suspect, let's turn that close down a little bit. See, the Lite version has a much softer tone to it. So maybe there's some timbre settings we can play with. So let's look in the settings window, and we've got the effects. We've got the round robin, velocity curve, where the lid position is, some various noises, and the overall sound. If we go to the Mercury Lite, we'll see we've got the same settings. And at the moment, those settings are pretty much set to the same. The key off noises are slightly lower. Let's put them up to the same thing. So again, we can look at these and see where the differences are. Well, for a start, the full version of Mercury has up to 4 round-robin samples. Obviously, you can see here the loaded instrument is 1.2 gigabytes for its basic instrument. The Lite version has a maximum of 2 round-robins. And if you load up both round-robins, you've got a total of 400 megabytes sample loading. So it's far less stressful on your memory, on your CPU. Velocity curve settings are the same for both. You can choose lid, open, mid, and close, and I'm assuming that's not a different sample set. That's a filter they're applying there. You've then got the noises in there, pretty much the same for both. It's the sound control which seems to be very different. Because you've got the different mics available to you in Mercury, the timbre by definition is sharper and harder and brighter because you've got those close mics. You've got those beautiful, close, unaffected mics. And the further you move away from your piano, the more wishy and washy the sound becomes and the less definition you've got. And this is, I think, what Mercury Lite is really lacking in terms of performance. It lacks that close definition. You can bring the timbre back by playing with the timbre knob. So if I go back to the Lite version, just play a little arpeggio with my left hand, and bring the timbre down. There we are, we've got a nice but now we've lost the deep end. So the compromise between Mercury and Mercury Lite is that you are stuck with the ambience of Mercury Lite, and you've only got marginal controls over timbre without losing perhaps some of the bottom end and making it unpalatable. The other big difference is between the two of them is if you're after that pop piano sound, if you're after that close, personal, super compressed, bright, kind of Elton John-esque pianos, Mercury Lite is going to have a hard time doing those because if you go into the effects section and add some compressor, let's just add a bit of a compressor there. There we go. And let's go back to the settings and bring the timbre something a bit brighter again. There we go. A little bit less on the compressor, maybe a little bit less on the output, and then we see, it's got that nice hard attack and that nice bright timbre. The volume's all wrong, so I've not really got that right, but it sounds very, very washy because you're compressing all of those samples, you're compressing all of that ambience as well. If you do the same kind of thing with the bigger version of Mercury, so bring the threshold down to about the same, put the ratio up to about the same, leave the output about the same. We're not going to play with the timbre because we don't really need to, and bring down the mid and bring up the close, which is of course what you can do with this piano. Make sure that's set up right, and then go back to the same piece. Let's just change that compression setting. That's a little bit on the hard side. There we go. A little bit too much compression. Oh, it's compressing all the noises too. I need to turn them down. But I think that makes a much nicer poppy sound. So because you've got the mic control on the full version of Mercury, it's going to be for the people who want to mix, compose, produce music of various incarnations. If you choose, for instance, the ultra close and the super far, turn the super far up max, bring the ultra close right down, go back and turn off that compressor so it doesn't sound terrible. In the full version, you've now got this lovely kind of ambient, just going to turn the volume up a bit, lovely kind of ambient celestial piano. Which is just lovely, you know. It just sounds really pretty. You can't do that the Lite version. You'd have to export it out and process it out of the VST instrument into your DAW. So, for those of you who like to mix, this is going to be the version for you. Sadly, it means spending more money, but it is a very, very capable piano, and I've done a review of it elsewhere. The other thing that the Lite version has, which the full version has, is the animation. The little animation, there we go. So the animation exists on both. Why they did the animation, only they can tell us. Turn it off and resave. Don't use the animation, it just wastes time. And they've both got the HQ option. And when you put the HQ option on, your CPU tends to get a little bit more used. On this i7 3 point something gigahertz Mac, it goes up by about another 20%. So great for the final mix, but not great for the low latency performance. And actually, Mercury Lite has an almost equal loading on your CPU because it's doing a lot more work on those samples. It's not really the loading of the samples, it's the bottleneck, it's the processing. So that's your choice. You've got Mercury and Mercury Lite. Well, I'm just going to finish by going back to my usual mic setup, if I can remember what my usual mic setup is. Oof. Let's just reload my, let's go back to my thing and just go back to my piano. There we go. My mic positions. There we go. Happy days. Make sure they're all set up right. Yeah, they're good. Excellent. So we're back on my piano here. Mercury Lite's back on its default. Turn off the compressor, put the timbre back where it should be, and go back to the front screen. I've got these two piano pieces here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mute or solo. Yeah, I'll solo the Mercury, full version of Mercury first, start the piece off, and then halfway through I'll switch over to Mercury Lite, or maybe I'll just play the whole thing through, and you can see the difference. It's a kind of a bit of a mush. I just played a little while ago. I was just fiddling with some ideas. It's one of these kind of well, it's a bit of a boring piece, but it's got lots of dynamic range in it. So have a listen to both pianos playing exactly the same MIDI information and see what you think. So that was the full version of Mercury. Now let's put the clock back to 0 and listen to the Lite version. So those are the two pianos side by side. They're both actually very nice pianos, don't get me wrong, they're really, really nice pianos, but as you can hear, they're going to have their uses. So I hope this has been useful. Thank you very much.